I'd have for burning a $50,000 birthday check after my mother called me shallow and my father mocked my success. I sat in my cramped bedroom, the smell of machine oil and dusty old books filling the air. My name is Alex. I'm 28 years old, and I still live in the same small house in Raleigh, North Carolina where I grew up. My walls were covered with posters of entrepreneurs I admired, people who'd made it big from nothing. That was what I wanted too, even if no one else in this house thought I could. The door creaked open, and my dad's voice thundered in. "Still playing with those computers, Alex?" he barked. His name is Robert. He's a mechanic who's been working on cars since he was my age. "You're a grown man living in your childhood bedroom. Get a real job already. Stop leeching off us." I didn't bother answering. I just stared at the cracked screen of my laptop, my fingers tapping at the keys even though I wasn't really typing anything. My heart was racing like it always did when he came in. I knew he'd never understand. He snorted and slammed the door shut behind him. The sound echoed through the thin walls of our house. I could hear him grumbling as he walked down the hall. "Dreamer," he called me. "Useless dreamer." Sometimes, I almost believed him. But then there was Mom Linda. She worked long hours at the post office, her shoulders always slumped from carrying the weight of everyone's packages and problems. She'd knock softly on my door late at night, after Dad had gone to bed. "Here, honey," she'd whisper, slipping a folded $20 bill into my hand. "For groceries or whatever you need." Her eyes were tired but kind, and when she smiled at me, it felt like someone had switched the light back on in my world, even if just for a moment. "Thanks, Mom," I'd say, my voice tight. "I'm working on something, you know? It's going to work out. I promise." "I know you're trying," she'd say. She never said more than that, but it was enough to keep me going. During the day, while Dad fixed engines in the garage and Mom trudged from one house to the next delivering mail, I buried myself in stories of people who'd made it, founders who started in their basements, teenagers who turned side hustles into empires. My room was a shrine to those stories, stacks of biographies, piles of old startup magazines, and a collection of computer parts I'd salvaged from yard sales and Craigslist giveaways. Some nights, I'd lie awake, staring at the glow of my laptop, listening to Dad's snores rattling through the floorboards. I'd tell myself that one day, I'd make enough money to move us all somewhere better, somewhere that didn't smell like oil and regret. But most days, all I could do was sit there and try not to let the weight of my dad's disappointment drown out the small, stubborn voice inside me that said I was worth something. I had to believe it, because if I didn't, no one else would. A few nights later, I couldn't sleep. I was lying on my bed, scrolling through endless YouTube videos about how to make money online, each one more far-fetched than the last. My eyelids were heavy, but then a video caught my eye. How I made my first $1,000 selling rare coins online. No inventory needed. I clicked it. The guy on the screen was about my age, sitting in a messy apartment, talking about finding rare collectible coins and flipping them for a profit. No fancy degrees, no expensive startup costs, just the internet and a little hustle. Something in me snapped awake. This was it. This was my chance. The next morning, I got up before the sun. While my dad grumbled about the cold as he headed to the garage, I was already glued to my laptop. I watched that video at least 5 more times, then started researching everything I could find about selling coins online. I learned about sourcing coins from estate sales and online auctions, how to tell a genuine collectible from a cheap knockoff, how to market to collectors. For 2 days straight, I barely left my room. My fingers were raw from typing, my eyes burned from staring at the screen. But I didn't care. For the first time in years, I had something to work toward that didn't feel like a dead end. I spent every penny I had left on a cheap website domain and a few listings of coins I found online. I didn't even own the coins. I was just acting as a middleman, listing them on my own site and then buying them from other sellers when someone placed an order. The whole thing felt sketchy as hell, but I was desperate to see if it could actually work. A week later, I got the email. "You've made a sale." It was only $20, but my hand shook as I read it, like it was a golden ticket. I could almost hear my dad's voice in my head, calling it a waste of time, a pipe dream. But it didn't matter. I had proof now, proof that it could work. That tiny success set something off in me. I spent every night learning everything I could about online sales. How to write listings that made buyers want to click. How to spot underpriced coins that I could flip for double the profit. My phone buzzed with new orders, small ones, but enough to feel like momentum. I didn't tell my parents. Not yet. I wanted to build this into something real before I let them see. And every time my dad called me a leech, I just smiled to myself. Because deep down, I knew he was wrong. A couple of months passed, and my small coin business was starting to bring in real money. Not enough to move out, but enough to help cover groceries and chip in for the internet bill. I tried to keep it quiet, slipping my share of the cash into the kitchen jar without making a big deal about it. But Mom noticed. She'd catch my eye across the table and give me a small, proud smile. Dad noticed too, but not in the way I hoped. One evening, as I was updating some of my listings at the kitchen table, he came in from the garage, wiping his hands on an old rag. He looked at the bills I'd left on the counter, my small contribution from that week's sales. "What's this, Charity?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He dropped the rag on the table and leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms over his grease-stained coveralls. "It's not charity," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm helping out. From my business." He scoffed. "Business? You mean that nonsense on your computer? Coins won't pay the mortgage, Alex. You're just playing games while the rest of us work for a living." Mom spoke up softly, like she always did. "Robert, he's trying. He's making progress." Dad cut her off with a snort. "Progress? Selling coins like some carnival hustler? That's not real work. That's a hobby." I swallowed hard, the heat rising in my cheeks. "It's not a hobby, Dad. I'm actually making money. I've been learning everything I can, and people are buying. It's not just some scam." He pushed away from the counter and stepped closer. "You think you're going to build a life on selling shiny pennies to idiots on the internet? That's not how the world works, son." Mom's face tightened, her fingers twisting the dish towel in her hands. She didn't say anything else, just turned back to the sink and started scrubbing at a plate that was already clean. I didn't argue. There was no point. I just picked up my laptop and retreated to my room. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I could hear Dad's heavy footsteps in the hallway, the occasional creak of the floorboards under his weight. Every sound felt like a reminder that I wasn't measuring up, that no matter how many coins I sold or how many dollars I added to the jar, I'd always be the disappointment. But there was something else too, something I hadn't noticed before. Mom had stopped giving me those little pep talks in the kitchen. She still slipped me 20s when she could, but her smile was different now. Tighter. Like she was proud of me, but scared of what it was doing to the family. I knew things were changing. My coins were selling faster every week, and with each sale, I felt a little more sure that I was on the right path. But every time I tried to show Dad, every time I tried to share the excitement of seeing those numbers grow on my PayPal account, it felt like I was pushing against a brick wall. And that wall was getting taller by the day. By the time I turned 29, I had saved enough money from my coin sales to finally move out. I found a small apartment downtown, nothing fancy, but it was bright and had a balcony that looked out over the city. When I signed the lease, I felt like I was finally breaking free. I wanted to share it with my parents, to show them that I wasn't just some kid playing games on the internet. So, I invited them over on a Saturday afternoon. I even picked out a new button-down shirt and cleaned every inch of the place before they arrived. When they stepped inside, I watched their faces carefully. Mom's eyes lit up. "Alex, this is beautiful," she said, her voice soft with pride. She walked slowly around the living room, her fingertips trailing over the back of the couch I'd bought secondhand. Dad just grunted, his lips twisting in a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "So you're really doing this," he said. "You think coins are going to keep the lights on in here?" "It's more than enough," I said, my voice calm. "I'm not just selling coins anymore, Dad. I'm building something real." He snorted and turned away, staring out the window like he couldn't bear to look at me. "I want you both to move in," I said suddenly, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess myself. "I know the house is getting older, and this place, it's better for you. It's got everything you'd need, and I can cover the rent." Mom's head snapped up. "Oh, Alex," she breathed. "You don't have to do that." Dad let out a short laugh. "You think we're going to live off your internet hustle? That's cute, kid." I swallowed hard, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not trying to show off. I just want to help. You've both worked so hard your whole lives." "Don't," he cut in. "Don't act like this is some grand gesture. We're not your charity case." Mom stepped forward, her hand on his arm. "Robert, he's just trying to help." He shook her off. "No, I won't be some burden on my own son. You want to play the big man? Do it without us." I looked at Mom. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't argue. "We can't, Alex," she said softly. "We're fine where we are." I tried to smile, but it felt brittle. "Okay," I said finally. "If that's what you want." They didn't stay long after that. Dad didn't say much as he walked out, his shoulders stiff. Mom paused in the doorway, giving me a sad little smile. "I'm proud of you," she said, and then she was gone. A few weeks later, it was Mom's birthday. I made reservations at an exclusive rooftop restaurant in the city, the kind of place that had a dress code and a 3-month wait list. I wanted to show her how much I appreciated everything she'd done for me. She and Dad showed up in their best clothes, looking a little out of place, but smiling politely as the waiter led us to a table with a view of the skyline. We ate expensive food I could barely pronounce, and for a while, it felt like maybe things were okay. After dessert, I handed Mom an envelope. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, pulling out the check I'd written for $50,000. "It's for you," I said, my voice thick. "To help with whatever you need, bills, the house, anything." For a moment, she just stared at it. Then her face hardened, and she pushed it back toward me. "Alex, what is this?" she said quietly. It's a gift, I said, for everything you've done for me. Dad leaned back in his chair and let out a sharp bark of laughter. Look at you, he said, trying to buy our respect like you're some big shot. I felt my chest tighten. It's not like that. I just wanted. We don't want your charity, he spat. We don't need your money. Mom didn't say anything. She just folded the check and set it on the table. Her smile was gone, replaced by a sad resignation I'd never seen before. I didn't argue. I just took the check and slipped it back into my jacket pocket, my hands shaking. The rest of the meal was quiet. We didn't talk about the check or the apartment or anything that mattered. When it was finally over, they walked out into the night without looking back. And I was left there, alone in a room full of strangers, wondering if I'd ever be enough for them. The night air was cool as I stepped outside the restaurant, the check still folded tight in my jacket pocket. Mom and Dad were already halfway down the block, their shoulders hunched like they were trying to make themselves small. I stood there for a minute, watching them go. My face felt hot, my hands numb. I should have known they'd never take it. Should have known this would just be another chapter in the same old story. I turned back to the restaurant's outdoor fire pit, the orange glow of the flames calling to me like a dare. My fingers curled around the check. $50,000, a fortune, a promise, and, in their eyes, nothing but an insult. I walked over slowly, my heart thudding in my chest. The fire crackled, spitting tiny embers into the night sky. I could still hear Dad's voice in my head, dripping with scorn. You think you can buy respect? You'll never be more than a kid playing with computers. My breath hitched. I thought of Mom's sad eyes, the way she couldn't meet my gaze when she handed the check back. I thought of all the nights I'd sat in that cramped bedroom, telling myself that if I just worked hard enough, they'd finally see me, that they'd finally be proud. I held the check over the flames, the edges already starting to curl. If my success insults you, I whispered to the empty patio, then you can fend for yourselves. I let go. The paper caught instantly, the fire devouring it in seconds. The smell of burning ink filled my nose, sharp and final. I watched until the last scrap turned to ash, drifting away into the night. When I turned around, they were both there. Mom's hand was over her mouth, her eyes wide and shining. Dad's face was set in stone, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on the fire like he couldn't believe what he'd just seen. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them even moved. Is that what you wanted to see? I asked, my voice shaking but loud enough to cut through the silence. Me. Just another fool trying to prove himself to people who'll never care? Mom opened her mouth, but no words came out. Dad just sneered and turned away, his hand on Mom's shoulder, as if to pull her back from me. I didn't wait to hear what he'd say next. I just walked past them, out of the restaurant and down the quiet street. My car was parked a few blocks away, and with each step I felt the weight of the night pressing in on me. My mind was a hurricane. Anger, guilt, relief, all tangled together so tight I couldn't tell them apart. I drove home in silence, my fingers clenched around the steering wheel until they ached. The apartment was dark when I walked in, the city lights twinkling outside my window. I sat down on the edge of my bed and tried to catch my breath. Had I gone too far? Was burning that check a mistake, a final bridge I'd never be able to rebuild? I didn't know. All I knew was that for the first time in my life, I wasn't begging for their approval. I wasn't waiting for their acceptance. I'd drawn my own line in the sand, and if they couldn't respect me for it, then maybe it was time to let them go. The night outside was quiet, but in my chest, it felt like the world was finally waking up. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen. My finger hovered over the mouse, a small window opened with the bank's website loaded up. My dad's words echoed in my head, his laughter still ringing in my ears. I clicked cancel payment. First the mortgage payments, then the utilities. I watched as each automatic withdrawal vanished from the list, my name wiped clean from their bills. It felt final, almost like erasing a mistake. The first voicemail from Mom came an hour later. Alex, please, you don't have to do this, she said, her voice thin and wobbly. We're struggling. You know that. Just think about it, okay? Call me. I didn't call her back. A couple of days passed, and the calls kept coming. I turned off my phone. I shut down my email. If they wanted to figure it out, they could do it without me. Meanwhile, my business exploded in a way I hadn't expected. The coins were just the start. Now I was flipping vintage watches, limited edition sneakers, anything with a story and a collector's market. My phone lit up day and night with orders and messages. My PayPal balance ticking up so fast, it almost didn't feel real. 6 figures a month. Me. The same kid my dad called a dreamer. The same kid who used to stare at the ceiling at night, convinced he'd never be enough. I thought the money would make me feel better. And in some ways, it did. My apartment was no longer just a rented room. It felt like mine, filled with things I'd chosen and paid for. I slept in sheets I'd bought myself, not the hand-me-downs from my parents' house. My fridge was stocked with groceries I didn't have to count out in 20s slipped from Mom's purse. But the nights were quiet in a way that cut deep. Sometimes, I'd look around at the walls of my new place and wonder if this was really what winning felt like. A week later, my phone buzzed with another voicemail from Mom. "Alex," she said, her voice shaking with tears, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, can we just talk? The bills, they're piling up. I don't know what to do." I sat there, listening to her voice echo in the darkness of my living room. My chest ached, but I didn't move. I didn't call back. The final message was from Dad. He didn't beg. He didn't apologize. Just a clipped, "We'll figure it out without you. Don't bother coming around." I should have felt relief. But all I felt was empty. The business kept growing. The money kept coming in, but the silence in my apartment was deafening. My phone used to be filled with calls from my parents, small updates, little worries, stupid family drama. Now, there was nothing. No laughter from Mom. No gruff teasing from Dad. I had traded one misery for another. Their scorn for this lonely success. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Mom and Dad were scraping by, figuring out how to pay the bills I used to cover without a second thought. And me? I was here, alone in an apartment filled with expensive furniture and no one to share it with. I didn't know if I'd ever stop wondering if this was the price of finally choosing myself. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when I heard the knock on my door. I was in the middle of packing up an order, an antique pocket watch that was going to some collector in California. I hesitated, fingers paused on the box, as the knocking came again, softer this time. When I opened the door, Mom stood there, her hair plastered to her face from the rain. She looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders hunched, her eyes red from crying. "Alex," she said, her voice breaking. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, not saying a word. She walked in slowly, glancing around like she was seeing the apartment for the first time. The air was thick between us, and I could feel the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on my chest. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, sinking into the couch. "Your dad and I, were being evicted. The bank sent the final notice this morning." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with tears. "I didn't come here to beg," she said. I needed to see you, to tell you the truth." I sat down across from her, my hands clasped together. "What truth?" She took a deep breath. "I was jealous, Alex," she said, her voice shaking. "Seeing you succeed when your dad and I worked our whole lives and never got ahead, it made me feel small. Like all those years we spent scraping by meant nothing, and you just did it. Like it was easy for you." "It wasn't easy," I said. My voice cracked a little. "I spent years in that room, trying to prove that I was worth something, trying to be enough for you and Dad." "I know," she whispered. "And I'm so sorry. I let my pride get in the way of seeing how hard you worked, how much you wanted to help." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to reach across the table and hug her, tell her it was all okay. But the memory of that night at the restaurant, the way she pushed the check back at me with cold eyes, wouldn't let me. "I can't forgive that, Mom," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You and Dad, you made me feel like I was never going to be enough. Even when I tried to share what I'd built, you turned it into a joke. You laughed at me." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I know. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to hear it from me, not from Dad." I leaned back in my chair, the ache in my chest almost too much to bear. "What are you going to do?" I asked finally. "I don't know," she said. "We're staying at your Aunt Martha's for now. She said we can stay until we figure something out." A few days later, Martha called me. Her voice was gentle but insistent. "They're really struggling, Alex," she said. "I know it's not your job to fix this, but they're your parents." I didn't answer her right away. I spent days thinking about it, about everything Mom and Dad had said and done, about the years I spent trying to be the son they wanted, the man they'd be proud of, about how, no matter what I did, it was never enough. One night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The city outside was quiet, but my mind was a storm. In the end, I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. I transferred $50,000 to Mom's account. No note, no explanation. Just a quiet end to a chapter that had been tearing me apart for years. I didn't tell her. I didn't want her to call and thank me or try to fix what was already broken. It wasn't a peace offering or an apology. It was just closure, my way of letting go. And when I shut my phone off and lay back down, I felt something inside me finally, blessedly, go still. For months later, I found myself sitting at my desk, staring at a blank screen. The world outside was moving fast, orders still coming in, my business still growing, life still pushing forward. But tonight, I wasn't working. I was writing, not for the store or for sales, just for me. I opened a new blog post, my hands steady on the keyboard. The title was simple: What I Learned When I Stopped Trying to Prove Myself. I didn't know if anyone would read it, but I needed to put it out there, to finally speak my truth. I wrote about how I'd spent most of my life chasing validation from people who could never give it to me, how I burned myself out trying to be what they wanted, how I'd learned, the hard way, that no amount of money or success could fill the hole left by a family that never believed in me. I didn't sugarcoat it. I admitted that I still didn't talk to my parents. That some nights, I lay awake wondering if I'd done the right thing, that the guilt didn't disappear overnight, and maybe it never would. But I also wrote about the freedom I'd found in letting go, how my apartment felt different now, less like a lonely box and more like a place I built for myself, how I woke up every morning knowing that I didn't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. I ended the post with a message I'd been telling myself in the quiet hours of the night. Forgiveness isn't about the past, I wrote. It's about releasing the hold it has on your future. When I hit publish, I sat back in my chair and let out a long, slow breath. The city lights outside my window were soft and blurred, and for the first time in a long time, I felt light. Not because everything was fixed, or because the hurt was gone, but because I was done carrying it. My business kept growing. I traveled to meet new sellers, found stories behind each coin and watch I sold. And I shared those stories, too, because I finally understood that even if no one else saw me, I was still worth telling. I didn't know if I'd ever see my parents again. But for the first time, that didn't scare me. Because I built something real, something that was mine. And that was enough.